Welcome everyone to this webinar on Materials and Substances Declaration Work Product Connectivity, presented by the International Aerospace Environmental Group, or IAEG. We will start by reviewing a few instructions for maneuvering the webinar platform for your convenience during the webinar. Thank you, Mike, for introducing their options during the webinar.
Thank you, Ali. If at any time during the webinar you want to ask a question, you can use the Q&A box directly below the audio panel on the left-hand side. Type in your question and hit submit, and it will be sent to the presenters. If you need to resize any of your boxes, you can do so either by hovering over the edges and dragging them to make them larger or smaller, or you can click the maximize button in the upper right-hand corner. If you need to mute the volume or for any reason you've lost volume, if you hover over the audio player, you will see a volume slider, and you can use that to control the volume. At any time, if any of your panels are not visible, you can use the icons at the bottom of the screen to click on them and bring the panels back up. During the broadcast, if at any point you have any technical support issues, please use the Q&A box, and a member of our team will get back to you. Thank you, Ali.
Thank you, Mike. And please note that this webinar is being provided in good faith for informational purposes only and is based on the best available information. It is to be relied upon at the user's own risk or discretion. IAEG and the authors and presenters of this material make no representations or warranties with regard to completeness, and no liability will be accepted for damages of any nature whatsoever resulting from the use of or reliance on the information included. No part of this webinar constitutes legal advice. And my name is Ali Rames. I will be moderating today's webinar. I'm a client support assistant with Haley & Aldridge, a consulting firm that focuses on environmental compliance, as well as management consulting and geotechnical engineering. We have been a liaison member with IAEG since 2019, and I assist Work Group 1 with management and coordination of various sub-team related projects, in addition to administrative oversight and work products. And today's webinar will be presented by Musier Pietros, Senior Sourcing Manager with GE Aviation, Carolyn Cooper, Policy Analyst in Global Enterprise Sustainability with Boeing, Dr. Shanying Zhang, a Technical Fellow with Boeing, and Dr. Lucine Reinbold, Engineering Lead in Global Chemical Substances Program with Raytheon Technologies. And we have a list of panelists as well. We have Elisa Dillick, Senior Manager, International Supplier Engineering with Raytheon Technologies. We have Mr. Rick Shanks, Engineering Manager, Global Chemicals Program with Pratt & Whitney. He's also our liaison for IPC E31K Committee. John Klin. I really hope I pronounced your name correctly, John Klin. European Business Product Stewardship Senior Specialist, EMEA PS&S with 3M. We've got Valerie Kuntz, Manager of Product Compliance with Ascent, and Glenn Satula, Environmental Scientist with Tetra Tech. He also helps formulate our ADSRT formulation and validation support. IAEG, to introduce our entire organization, IAEG is a forum where unprecedented collaboration can take place among leading aerospace and defense companies. Our focus is on addressing relevant issues related to climate change, to lead the way on chemical stewardship, engaging our vast and global supply chain to drive improvements on global environmental and sustainability issues facing the aerospace and defense industry. And we do that by developing effective solutions, taking all of the aerospace and defense industry value chain into consideration to ensure that our industry remains responsible and sustainable for the future. Our products are unique in that they are very complex and expected to be in service for multiple decades. IAEG was founded in 2011 with 11 founding companies, and today IAEG has nearly 50 member companies, which represent over 50% of the total global aerospace industry's annual revenue. To learn more about IAEG and the impact of our work groups on behalf of the aerospace and defense industry, you can explore our website. You can also find us on LinkedIn, where we regularly post news and communications from within our organization. And when visiting IAEG, you will see a list of all the work groups who contribute to IAEG success. These are all collaborative groups. We have Work Group 1, who establishes a standardized process and creates tools and resources for collecting information on chemicals to proactively respond to required reporting. We have Work Group 2, who work to reduce the cost and risk of investigation of alternatives to the affected non-competitive technologies. Work Group 3, who promote industry-wide greenhouse gas emissions accounting and reporting and to drive consistent practices. Work Group 5 provides REACH authorization support for global business continuity. We have Work Group 6, who develop a survey for the aerospace and defense companies to collect information about environmental sustainability within their supply chain. Work Group 7 provides ISO 14001 and environmental management system implementation. Work Group 9 develops an approach to help the aerospace and defense industry evaluate emerging global environmental and chemical regulations and their impact on compliance. And most recently, we have Work Group 11, who deploys and maintains an enduring aerospace industry voluntary standard for assessing environmental, social, and governance for ESG practices. One of Work Group 1's primary focuses is to generate support documentation that will promote consistency, quality, and efficiency of material and substance declaration data gathering. Our primary objectives are to reduce aerospace industry cost through improved consistency achieved through voluntary consensus standard creating an aerospace declarable substance list and data collection process. To enable consistent chemical risk communication, reporting, and implementation within the aerospace supply chain, and to reduce the risk of business interruption due to chemical risk data gaps. And with that, I will invite Musia Pietros to talk.
Thank you, Ali. Today, during this webinar, we'll state the challenging regulatory landscape that impacts the AD industry, explain the reasons that drove the industry to promote and advocate for a common language to exchange information at the business to business level, which is the founding reason for the formulation of this work group. We will then provide the composition makeup of the work group and introduce sub-team at the high level about their respective work products. At the end, we will reiterate the connectivity between each work products and provide you with helpful links to this webinar and the product shared within it. All right, next slide. As you can see in this product-related regulation by region, the product-related regulation by region has increased by an average rate of 13% per calendar year. The chart above shows 2015 as a beginning. However, the regulatory requirement journey goes back almost a decade ago when the EU end-of-life vehicle in 2003 came out, the EU restrictive hazardous substance in 2006, and EU REACH at the end in 2007 were enacted. The product-oriented regulation have different requirements, and some are targeted to a specific industry sector, and others are agnostic to industry sector. Regardless, their impact reaches out beyond sectorial industry boundary and challenge each industry to know what is contained in their lowest piece part material substance composition that's part of the bill of material of the finished product. Similar to the other sector, the AD industry has a global chain footprint, a high complex product structure with a long life cycle. Therefore, this product-oriented regulation requirement brings challenge to the industry from cradle to cradle of the product life cycle. Right. Just to show you the complexity of the product, and as you can see on the chart, how complex is the product, the AD product. Product within the aerospace and defense supply chain can range in levels of complexity. This image is taken from the Aerospace and Defense Industry Association of Europe, sectorial guidance for substance and article under REACH, illustrate just how complex a product such as commercial aircraft could be, as it comprises of thousands or millions of individual piece parts at various layers of product assembly. The product-oriented regulatory requirements impact at the lowest piece parts when the piece part substance and material composition is in scope of the regulation requirement. Furthermore, their declaration requirements thread from piece parts to the finished product. And if I go to the next slide. Now I'm going to overview talk. In this section, we are going to share the substance and product regulatory landscape that impact the industry. Oh, my screen went back up, sorry. Based on this product-oriented regulatory requirement just explained, the IAEG compelled to advocate a common approach, and for that reason, the Material Substance Declaration Workgroup got created. In this section, I'm going to introduce the Material and Substance Declaration Workgroup and the sub-team structure. As we proceed through the webinar, we're going to deep dive in each team of IAEG Workgroup 1. However, I would like to give you an overview of each sub-team objectives. As you can see, the 80 declarable substance list, the 80 declarable list team keep abreast with changing and emerging global chemical regulatory landscape. Furthermore, in an annual basis, the team updates the 80 DSL with a newly introduced regulatory substance that impacts the 80 industry. The declarable substance list is published in accordance with the IP 754 standard requirement. The 80 DSL is utilized by the substance reporting group because they embedded into the 80 SRT. The substance report just a second. Team facilitate the product declaration data. The 80 DSL is utilized by the substance reporting process support and training team to facilitate product declaration data exchange needs. The substance reporting subset team training team is composed of two separate teams, but work concurrently support each other. The ADSRT is compatible with the IPC 1754 and keep the ADSRT in sync with the latest ADDSL release and provide process support documentation and training for the substance reporting tool. In addition, the third team, which is the material and substance declaration support team, which provide guidance in how to consume the ADDSL declaration request received, where to look pertinent material data to the substance declaration needs, and how to estimate substance weight concentration relative to the piece part, apply and complete the ADSRT or any other declaration tools methods. Then the last piece is the communication team, which facilitate and socialize both internal to IAEG and external audience for the work group delivered by each team. Now I'm going to introduce you. Caroline is the leader of the ADDSL team, and she will explain the annual management and maintenance process of the ADDSL.
Thank you, Moussier. Hi, everyone. Subteam 1 is responsible for the creation and maintenance of the Aerospace and Defense Declarable Substances List, or ADDSL, which IAEG developed for use by the members of the aerospace and defense industry and its supply chain to collect product-related substances information from suppliers. IAEG developed the ADDSL as it became clear that the aerospace and defense industry needed to take a proactive approach to identifying the substances that are of significant interest to them. The ADDSL is a tool that can be used to more effectively manage product-related compliance and obsolescence risks that may specifically impact our industry. As Moussier mentioned earlier in this presentation, the current global regulatory landscape is growing at a rapid rate of 13% annually. As countries, regions, and jurisdictions around the world develop chemical regulations, Subteam 1 identifies the regulations that we believe will impact the aerospace and defense industry, specifically identifying regulations that are restricting or planning to restrict substances. And in doing that, rather than looking at regulations that will require training requirements or in specifically pulling out regulations that have aerospace exemptions. So taking a discerning eye to those regulations. We then use that list of regulations to generate a regulated substances list. On an annual basis, we then ask that our member companies review the regulated substances list and identify which substances on the list are used by the member companies and their supply chain. We ask that they identify the chemical substances that are included in their products, are used in the production of those products, or are required for operation or maintenance of those products. Once these member responses are vetted, we then use that information to build the ADDSL, which is then published on IAEG's website in 3 formats. The first format, Excel, allows the data to be sorted and filtered as needed and is used by the ADSRT. The second format, PDF, can be used as a handy reference for people, and the third format is XML. XML is a file format used that was developed to store, transmit, and reconstruct data. This file format is used to support material declaration for those that can utilize more sophisticated reporting systems. Next, I want to talk to you briefly about how the ADDSL is connected to the ADSRT and IPC 1754. I won't go into too much detail here, as you'll hear more about them both shortly, but the thing to note is that the ADDSL, specifically the Microsoft Excel format of the ADDSL, is used as a common substances declarable list for the Aerospace and Defense Substances Reporting Tool, or the ADSRT. This tool was developed by a Subteam 4 to allow those IAEG member companies and their supply chains that do not have sophisticated ERP or PLM systems to provide substance declaration information. In addition, the ADSRT by design is compatible with the IPC 1754 standard. The XML version of the ADDSL was developed to be used by the companies who have sophisticated ERP or PLM systems that have been embedded or that have embedded declaration solution that's compatible with IPC 1754. This solution could be developed by a company's IT department or by using a third-party solution provider's tool or service. Using a common list like the ADDSL reduces the reporting burden to the aerospace and defense member companies and their supply chain. Both the ADDSL and ADSRT are compatible to IPC 1754. And IPC 1754 is just a standard that establishes the requirements for exchanging material and substance data for products between suppliers and their customers for the aerospace and defense industry and other industries. All right, so next up, we're going to take a poll. And the question here is, what does DSL stand for? I started with an easy one this morning, or hopefully you'll consider it to be easy. So just pause here and give everybody a chance to think and answer. All right, just another few seconds and then I'm going to move on. All right. So moving on. Here, the answer is declarable substances list. That is what it is. So with that, I hope everybody enjoyed that question. We'll see what's coming up next. All right. So here, Moussier and Channing Moussier and Channing jointly lead the substances reporting process support and training team. Channing is going to walk you through the management and maintenance of the ADSRT, including the process support document needs. Go ahead, Channing.
Thank you, Karen. To reduce confusion and burden of companies in aerospace on substances reporting, Moussier and I are leading 2 sub-teams to develop aerospace defense substance reporting to what we call ADSRT, as shown here a little bit, as well as related training. So specifically, Moussier lead a team whose objectives are to develop supporting process documentation and helpful training for the ADSRT use communication. The team I lead works to 1, maintain ADSRT compatibility with the IPC 1754 standard, and 2, ensure the tool stays up to date with the latest ADSL list and the corresponding update traceability maintenance, so any declarations completed will be accurate. Both teams work very closely and have a common change management process and a single request and incident maintenance system. Now I will turn it over to Muse to talk about specifics.
Flow diagram in the ADSRT overview, as you can see on this chart. And the decision flow diagram describes on how the users step through the complete his or her declaration. Each rectangular block is an Excel tab within the ADSRT. And if you count them, there are 7 tabs that require the user to complete data element. This data element could be either mandatory, conditional mandatory, or optional data field. As you observe, each rectangular block has a line color. And if you can see, the block with the green color line perimeter indicates the tab is a mandatory and must be completed by either the requester and supplier. The block with the blue color line indicates the tab has a mandatory field that the user must complete. However, the action depends on how the user answered the product statement query list. Block with the red dot line indicates tabs are optional, but users should pay attention because some of those data elements might be conditional, mandatory, or contractually binding. Just to clarify regarding data elements that are mandatory, conditional, mandatory, or optional. Mandatory or optional are obvious terms that we don't need to explain it well. We don't need to explain it on this platform. However, the conditional mandatory fields are data elements that turn to become mandatory or optional depend directly to a precedent question or data elements that the user has answered or completed. And just another simple reminder, this condition could also change due to the business-to-business contractual agreement between the requester and supplier. While I'm in the slide, I'm going to highlight the product group. The product group is an optional tab. And I just want to explain it, what's the difference between a single product or a product group and how you can utilize it. So single product consists of one part with a unique material composition and requires one declaration. However, product that shares same material and substance composition could utilize one substance declaration as a reference to represent the entire product group because they share substance and material composition. So you could use that product group to really populate one information and use that reference to answer all your product group that you have. In the next slide, I'm going to deep dive post-product statement declaration flow. Right. In this slide, I'm going to step through post-product statement query list. Question 1, product contains substance on the ADSL, and question 2, product process requires a substance of use on the ADSL, and what outcome will be generated that is compatible to the IP 754 standard classification. If the user answers the product statement query question with no, tabbed and to the supplier. If the user answers the product statement query question with no for the DSL containing the product and answer no to the DSL used in process, then he needs to complete, if you have any attachment, he can include the attachment, and then he needs to jump to the supplier acceptance. Once he completes this flow, The only thing is left is really complete the data. And that task is completed. That translates to class E of the IP754. So when he complete that and he doesn't have any substance within the DSL, and he doesn't have both in product and process, then if you have any attachment he can add if you want to share, but he will jump straight to the supplier acceptance, and then that equate to the IP754 class E. However, if he answered the question 1, which is the ADDSL substance contain the product, with yes, he must complete, because that's a mandatory requirement to fill that substance in product, whatever field is required within that tab. And if he say yes to substance contained in the process, then he needs to complete the substance in process, and then he can attach any file to support his declaration. At the end, he needs to complete the supplier acceptance, which that tells that he did it to the best of his knowledge, his or her knowledge, that he complete the data in accordance to what data he has in hand. Once he complete that information, that task is completed, and then that equate to the IP754 class E and F. If he just only respond to the ADDSL list, if he goes beyond ADDSL list, then that translates to the IP754 class E and G. So this concludes really the ADSRT completion, as well how it's compatible to the IP754 as you populate that information. Now we go into another question. So this is, when is a declaration considered as class E? I just explained that one, that might be easy. So I'll wait for a few minutes to get your answers. So this is not, it's just, we went through it. So let me see. Oh, let me go back. All right, I see. I think I clicked without, my apology. All right, I see that it's the 2 question at the end. I think it confused people because the correct answer is when a product does not contain any DSL substance. And that's class E when you don't have the substance in product or in your process, then translate that one to IPC class E. So, all right. Lucy, I'm going to introduce Lucy. Lucy is the Material Substance Declaration Team Deputy, as well. She is the Declaration Support Team Lead. Lucy is going to walk you through the regulatory declaration drivers and how to estimate the substance concentration present in a product. Lucy.
Good morning, everyone. Good afternoon. Due to the constantly evolving regulatory requirements around the world, coupled with company-specific requirements and the global nature of supply chains, it is more important than ever to be able to generate accurate and compliant materials and substances declarations to provide critical information on product content. This helps facilitate effective data exchange with respect to safe use and product disposal information, as well as risk management efforts. As mentioned earlier, products within the aerospace and defense supply chain can range in levels of complexity. To illustrate an example of a complex product, though less so than a commercial aircraft, an LED lamp is shown here to contain articles or lowest level parts, such as an LED module, thermal transfer pad, heat sink, base, and a socket. It also contains a subassembly driver, which itself contains its own lower level parts or articles, such as a capacitor, an LED integrated circuit, resistor, and a printed circuit board. Each of these 9 lowest level parts shown in red contain their constituent materials and substances that must be reviewed by the LED lamp manufacturer in order to determine what is to be declared. Substance declarations occur at this article level within a complex product or assembly. This helpful illustration can be found in IAEG's recently published Declaration Development Support document on our website. This resource is intended to support increased capability and quality in the development of materials and substances declarations in the aerospace and defense industry and its global supply chain. IAEG's new document includes information on methods and considerations companies may use to develop substance content estimates for their hardware or article products, including from applied materials such as coatings or adhesives. The document also discusses estimating substance losses associated with volatile material evaporation and includes example geometric calculations for common parts, for example, washers, rivets, and screws, as well as related sources of data. Also included is a list of common reportable substances encountered in aerospace and defense applications, as well as standard military and industry surface finish treatment specifications for reference. For more information on IAEG's Material Declaration Support resources, please access the IAEG Workgroup 1 webpage shown here. And time for another quiz question. So true or false, when you have a product or assembly that contains multiple parts or subassemblies within it, substance mass is calculated and reported at the top assembly or product level. I'll give everyone a moment. We have a 50-50 shot of getting this right, so see some responses coming in. We'll just give it another moment. All right, last chance. And the answer is false. Substance mass is calculated and reported at the lowest level piece part or article level, i.e. the lowest level part on a bill of materials for a product. With that, I will welcome back Musier Pietros to talk about our workgroup communications and work product socialization.
All right. Thank you, Lucy. And I'm going to go into the next slide. And the communication team facilitate all the portal posting needs for the work products released by each team. And that's intended for really public consumption. In addition, they facilitate the socialization of the tools and work product to internal members and as well the AD supply chain using social media applications. The slide shows where the ADDSL, ADSRT, and the development support document are posted currently. And that's the IAEG website. But we use each of those applications that you see at the bottom, the YouTube as well, LinkedIn, to communicate out and distribute whatever product we put in the site so people they can utilize either as a training or as a communication that there is a new release of ADDSL or a new product of ADSRTs publicly available for people to use for their declaration needs. So the communication team facilitate that to broadcast what we create as a team and publish it to the posted on the website as well, communicate through any application, so social media application. From that, I'm going to introduce Ali to start the Q&A session with the panelists.
Great. Thank you so much, everyone. Again, if you have any questions, you can click on that Q&A button in the bottom. We have a few questions that came in pre-registration and also during the call. So anything that comes up that you're curious about, there's a lot of different ways that all of the products that you use in declaration connect to each other. So if you picture the full process, also give us your questions that you are curious about that truly frustrate you in your process if you're involved in the declaration development process within your company. we are here to answer those questions. A lot of different collaboration going on in this forum. So let me go ahead and start off with a few questions. One question that we had, and I'm going to open this to Lucy and then anyone else that wants to answer, how does this relate to NAS 411's list?
Okay, thanks for the question. I assume we're talking about the Aerospace and Defense Declarable Substances List, or ADDSL. So there are a couple of components that feed into the NAS 411-1 hazardous material target list. Whether the U.S. Department of Defense has concerns with a particular substance, as well as if the chemical or substance has product-related uses within the aerospace and defense industry. The ADDSL basically provides the second context, namely the defense industry dependence on substances, that then feeds into the development of the DoD's NAS 411-1 list.
Thank you. I'm going to go into a question that we had. Is IAEG identification, ID, compatible within IPC? If yes, where in IPC can we find it? And maybe Valerie can answer that question, or a couple of the people that are involved in IPC 1754 standard.
Depends on what we actually mean by ID for IAEG. The IPC has several different solution providers that are able to create or generate the 1754 related XML files. And many of them can also take in the ADSRT and then help generate that 1754. An actual ID related to IAEG, as far as being able to use your IAEG ID as an identifier for your company, that's just a portion or a piece within the fields that can be included as an identifier of your company. But IAEG is not a specific company that is able to generate 1754. They do the ADSRT and then work with solution providers to make that into a 1754 XML file.
If Valerie, if I may add, I think, if they're talking about the substance list, we have an IAEG ID associated to the CAS list. I don't think IP 754, it gives us how to really, to be the authority for it. So any CAS that is on the IAEG list, in the ADDSL list, has an IAEG ID. If they talk in that really we are the authority for it. And that's the ADDSL that we created. So from IPC perspective, we meet to the requirement, but IPC doesn't have a equivalent to that IAEG ID for CAS. But we meet the requirement the way it's defined. I think just correct me if I'm wrong.
Yes. Nope, you are absolutely correct. The IAEG ID can be used within the XML in order to identify a specific substance or CAS number. You can also use the actual CAS number, which most anybody is able to identify, and then the authority would be CAS. But for those IAEG identifiers or numbers that represent potentially substance groups that don't have a CAS number, that can be used as part of the process, and it's just included as part of the ADDSL.
Thank you, Valerie.
I was looking at it from a different way, so thank you, Misty.
Okay, we're getting some good questions in here. Part of the supply chain has showed resistancy to adopt the ADDSL list instead of REACH list of SVHCs. So is there any additional global strategy to leverage the overall supply chain, specifically at smaller sub-tier level of suppliers? Great question. Up for anybody to step in. Do
you want me to give it the first shot, Monsieur? That's basically is between you and your customer, because they could add their own list in addition to the DDSL. So is really a contractual, what they really want from, between the supplier and the requester, or the customer and supplier. They could have the whole ADDSL, or they could have only the subset of very high concern. That's really defined on the contractual agreement that you have to declare against to. The ADDSL is a common list between our AD industry, but it's really up to the business to business interaction, how you're going to interact with your customer. They could go beyond, or could go just substantive very high concern, just the ACA list, or they could add their own list. So anybody want to add to that?
This is Rick Shanks. I'll just add that it's clearly in the supply chain, it's a case of, do they think a regulation affects them or not? And if they're outside the EU, they don't necessarily, supply chain don't necessarily recognize that any other regulation applies to them. Now, with the inclusion of the ADDSL to the NAS 411 list, certainly DoD suppliers, as the NAS 411 requirement is started to flow down, there should be additional recognition and adoption of the ADDSL substances indirectly because of that contractual requirement as well.
Thank you, Rick.
This is Valerie. I'm going to add one additional thing. The ADDSL is relatively new in the industry. I know it's been around for several years, but it's relatively new in the industry, and it is similar to other industry standard DSLs like the Addsl, the General Automotive Declarable Substance List. And it took several years for the Addsl to become more consistently accepted and required by suppliers in order to respond. It's going to take likely a bit of time before suppliers are ready to respond to the ADDSL. But the main intention behind the ADDSL is to come up with a more industry standard substance list. So you're not getting different substance lists from different companies requesting a whole bunch of different pieces of information that vary just slightly from what the ADDSL is trying to put out there. So they're trying to work with as many companies as possible to get the list together and come up with a standard list that industry can respond to in a more automated fashion as we continue forward. So encourage your suppliers, if you are working with them, to begin to use the ADDSL and respond to that and collect the data from their suppliers, because the more that it is used, the more it is going to be able to be a common standard across the different aerospace and defense companies.
If I may, I'll add just a little bit to what Valerie said as well. The ADDSL is different than the SVHC candidate list. When you're declaring to the candidate list, it's a compliance declaration. You're saying you comply with Article 33 of REACH when declaring to that. ADDSL, as we mentioned early in the webinar, we are also looking at supply chain risks. So we are trying to dive deeper, get more information about substances and formulations. And so it's a different mindset of why we're asking for that larger list of substances. So that will take time to evolve as well.
Thank you, Rick. Thanks, everybody that answered the question. I hope that does answer the question. If you do have additional questions about that, got great responses, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A as well. We also have members of IAEG that are part of supply chain and also part of the formulation of these work products that we have. So if you have any questions about the use of the ADDSL or the use of ADSRT, go ahead and post that in the Q&A as well. We did have one question that was talking about the strategy companies use to engage the supply chain and the use of the ADDSL. I'm not sure if anyone has any kind of information that they can give, or because Lucia, do you want to see if you can answer that in some manner?
Can you repeat the question again? I think.
Yep, share the strategy companies use to engage supply chain and use of the ADDSL.
I think that's a tough one to answer because it's going to be between the business, since it's a business to business interaction, and if it's a declaration process internally to whoever is asking that question, that's need to be done. Understand how you're going to add it to your either the new product introduction or change management that you have. As those things change, how do you deploy that and collect information for that specific part? Then how do you interact with the supplier? It's going to be really at the business to business, how you're going to engage them and how you're going to collect different means that you have through your sourcing team and collect that information. So it's really a company proprietary at that point. Like how do they want to dialogue with their supplier? We facilitate them by creating this work products from ADDSL to have a common, like Valerie was mentioned, a common list that we as the AD industry can use, as well ADSIT can facilitate the lowest food chain that you have in your supply, so they can utilize an Excel spreadsheet. And the people that they have sophisticated tools, they can use the ERP PLM system if they are embedded the IP754 compatible tool. So that's, you could engage your supplier, but it's really how you engage your supplier is going to be almost like a business to business interaction. The only thing we could facilitate is really educate them this tool that we created to facilitate that data exchange. And if you have a common way of communicating back and forth, that really reduces the burden into the supply chain, because each of them, they don't have to really talk to us in a different language for each specific AD company. So this one is a tough to answer, but that's the best I can give on this one.
We have
So
a couple more
I'll add a little bit to that.
Go for it.
If I may, I'll add just a little bit to that. And it's more of my previous statement. So engaging suppliers to declare to the ADDSL really has to be a decision in your company, or a decision that your customers are asking you for to do that. And it takes more work, it takes more encouragement, but it's really more a case of it's not just a compliance declaration. It becomes a indicator of your appetite for seeking supply chain risk information. If that's important to your company, then you're going to push your suppliers to contractually push your suppliers to declare to the ADDSL. If it's not, some companies are not going to do that push.
And Rick, I think, if I may add on that one, I think you hit in the two targets really, the way I see it, and correct me, Rick, if I'm wrong on this one, is one is really your substance existing in the product, and the other one in process. Both of them, they are important because they bring the obsolescence side for us, and the long life of our product.
Correct.
Those obsolescence become really very vital to deliver the product we want to deliver to our customers. So that's true. I agree with you. Thanks for.
Thank you both. One question that we get a lot: why does a specific substance appear on the ADDSL? Carolyn, do you want to start us off with that one?
Sure, thanks, Allie. Yeah, so with that question, we do get that a lot. Why are substances appearing on the ADDSL? But we have internal work products that allow IAEG members to determine that connection between the ADDSL and the regulation. It's a great benefit of membership to IAEG. I would just say that sometimes a substance can appear on the ADDSL due to one regulation, and other times there could be, 5, 10, multiple regulations that cause it to appear. So really, it's like I said, it's a great benefit of having, there's an internal work product that we can review, but yeah, it is based on regulations. It's really just dependent on the substance.
And this is Valerie. One thing I would like to add is that the ADDSL has a zero threshold, meaning that if the substance is in the product at all, regardless of the amount, it is supposed to be declared. And that's because there's so many different regulations that aerospace and defense may be in scope for. And this way they have that additional information, but it also goes to the obsolescence portion of it, where if that substance is used somewhere in the product and is no longer available, that's going to be an issue. So knowing about it in advance is a piece of information that the companies receiving the ADDSL need to know, and then they can work to either work with the supplier that is providing that part to potentially come up with a another option for that particular substance, or the companies are aware that they have that, and it's going to be of concern as we continue moving forward. Because IAEG is always looking forward; they're always looking at where regulations are trying to go, and so they're on that edge of knowing, something's going to be authorized here, something's going to be restricted, and we have additional things that we have to do in order to resolve that, so we can get that into our product and continue moving forward.
Thank you. Thank you both. I believe we have time for maybe one or two last questions. Does the Materials and Substances Declaration development document specifically address ADDSL declarations?
Yeah,
Lucy, Lucy, you're on it.
Yeah, I've got it. Thank you for the question. So even though this important document resides within the Workgroup 1 scope, we intentionally wrote this support document to be regulation agnostic. So it is not meant to specifically address only creating an ADDSL declaration, but rather walks the reader through a general flow chart of how one would work through their bill of materials or whatever the product is, and drill down to the material level and then the substance level, and determine how to calculate quantities of these substances that are then declarable. So this could apply to any kind of regulation that requires chemical reporting and substance quantities. And there are actually example calculations provided in one of the appendices that show examples that are calculated against various regulations, such as the ADDSL, and there's an EU REACH example, as well as a few others.
Hey, Lucy, if I may add on this one,
Sure.
I think is really agnostic compliance as well tools, because it's really showing you how we can estimate the substance exists in that article applied. So
Correct.
it helps you really to collect that information to whatever declaration tools or field that you need to complete, because that's
absolutely.
it's easy to say, but it's a very complicated process to do. So it's
Absolutely.
a good
Thank you.
document.
Thank you. I don't believe. Okay, well, we do not have any more questions in the Q&A. So, maybe one more second, just in case people have additional questions. Or want to touch on specific items that they find difficult. Yeah.
Ali, I was going to say something. I guess I'm going to put John on the spot, I guess, because he feeds to a lot of different industries. John, do you want to comment, I guess, in how those tools, not to put you on a spot?
Sorry, the question, Lucy, you were asking was how the tools
John,
connect,
to John, overview. I think how does he use the tool and what's the benefit? Because he's really feeding a lot of different sectors as well as.
Right, or what difficulties he has with his supply chain.
Yeah, it's. Can you hear me well?
You got it.
Okay. It's indeed a pretty difficult situation if you're on the top of the supply chain, delivering chemicals, but also the first article levels to several industries. And the ADDSL is one declarable substance list, and we have, of course, the others as well to take care of. So if it's an automotive customer, it's the Addsl list. So for us in the supply chain, we need to adapt to those, and we are used to that. So we get a lot of different lists And what we try to do is set up our systems that we are able to accommodate all of those industry lists. The ADSL is nothing different from that. And we do our best to also then provide the information via the standard if requested. So if we have some smaller suppliers in between, and we have some questions on leveraging the supply chain, and certainly the smaller sub-tier level suppliers, I think if they are convinced that they need to gather the information, I think getting the information from the chemical industry and the lower and the first article levels would not be the biggest issue, but really starting that activity to ask us as a chemical supplier, would be good to do. So talking to them and convincing them to start doing the work, and I think they will get the information where they need it. So just as an additional comment.
Yeah, thank you, John. Absolutely. I mean, it is also difficult business to business decisions, depending on how many industries you represent as well. So, all right, you know what? With the final moments, I'm going to share with everyone. We have on our website. You can also access through the handouts. You can come back in through the link that you registered with and view the slides. Following the meeting, I'm going to be uploading those in addition to Mike's support. I want to thank everyone for contributing to this webinar. Any questions that you have, please send them to, you can barely see it down there, but it's questions@ieg.com. So I will also follow up with an email with the slides. We are going to be posting this presentation on YouTube. And coming November 2022, we are going to have part 2 of the Materials and Substances Declaration Development training from Lucy Reinbold. And that is going to be the 8th of November. We are going to be sending out a registration link soon. Again, you can contact us if you would like to be given a link to that prior to us releasing it on LinkedIn. And for IAEG members, we will be sending an email out. We also have a new edition of the Materials and Substances Declaration Development document that we're going to be releasing. But check IAEG.com and go to that Workgroup 1 link, and you can access all of the documents that we discussed in this meeting. And again, when you receive the slides, we've got links to our membership. You can click there. We are a decade old and still going much stronger because of all the collaboration that we have within the work group. So this forum has excellent subject matter experts, and we thank everyone for volunteering to come and be part of this forum. Thank you to everyone. Thank you, our panelists. Thank you to those who contributed with questions and answers, and we will follow up.